Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. This week we are kind of piggybacking off of an episode that we've done previously about parents' frustrations with the traditional school system. And today we're going to break that down a little bit further for specific pain points that parents have with traditional schooling. We recently had our team do some further research into the biggest complaints or issues that parents are having with traditional schooling to see why more and more are turning to homeschooling or online education and some of these other kind of non-traditional education opportunities. So we wanted to kind of break that down a little bit. And then over the next couple of weeks, we're going to dive a little deeper into why they're choosing to homeschool, or maybe why they're choosing not to homeschool, and how those kind of issues within the education system are driving these decisions for parents. So, Sarah, do you want to dive into one of the
Mhm.
first pain points?
Yeah, so we tried to break it down into some common themes that we found, and the first theme hovered around the idea of curriculum. Parents aren't fully satisfied with the curriculum. In the past, I really believe that the lockdowns through COVID and the shift to digitizing everything and having students work on school from home was eye-opening for many parents, where before, some parents aren't as involved with what's going on in the school, what's being taught. You might just ask your kids on the way home from school, like, hey, what did you learn today? I don't know, not much, or like, you just don't get a big response. And sometimes parents don't really push the issue. You just assume learning is happening, right? But with everybody coming home and parents actually getting to see what's happening, it brought up that concern about curriculum. Like, oh my goodness, this is what actually is being taught to my student. I had no idea. So I think parents just now it's a little bit more eye-opening throughout that whole thing. And many parents are just unsatisfied with what they saw. So we're before, maybe a little bit of ignorance or just assuming that everything was in line with what their thoughts were. Now, maybe not so much. So just general unsatisfaction with what's being taught or not being taught, and maybe wanting a little bit more control over what's being taught. So between that, the quality of the curriculum, and just generally unsatisfied with the school system and how the curriculum is decided on. Not all parents choose to be involved in those decisions with the school and be active with the school board. And again, these things weren't necessarily brought to light until the students were at home working on this stuff, and parents had to be more involved during that. And then some parents just want a curriculum or just general learning that's more tailored to their own values and beliefs. So, I do think that with the political climate, people are on both ends of the spectrum, or all ends of the spectrum, I should say. And parents just are generally unsatisfied with what's being taught in one way or another, and just are looking for something that's more tailored to their own thoughts and beliefs. So this is some of the research that we found when looking into specifically with the curriculum theme. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that, Anjali?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. And like you said, I think it really being at home, seeing what was being taught shed some light on that. I remember seeing, memes and pictures of what the heck, this is what's being taught to my student. And, maybe the awareness, just wasn't there. And so I think in this digital world that we live in, it's easier for parents to kind of have that hands-on access and see what's being taught and have a little bit more of a say for them to, hey, I don't like this, or I want my student to learn more about this. Can we do a project based on this, or this? And so it's pretty flexible nowadays. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then another theme that came up was kind of, you know, that appeared over and over was quality. And this kind of aligns with the curriculum, right? The quality of the curriculum, what's being taught, how it's being taught, those type of things, but also the quality of the teaching staff and lesson preparation was a big theme as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, again, I feel like we blame COVID for a lot of things, but really, I mean, COVID has caused kind of a mass exodus for teachers as well as healthcare workers just because of the strain and stress and all the things that went along with that. And so, with the quality of education, it's harder to find qualified teachers that are good teachers that are there for the right reasons and want to teach kids. And so I think that's a big concern of parents, as well as, the preparation time for lessons. Sometimes teachers are overworked, underpaid, so they might not have as much time to put into the lesson prep and have it be the way they want it to be. And that's just kind of one of the downsides of education and in general. And I think parents are kind of more aware of that and realizing, what are our alternatives? Could I do this better? Or could an online program help my child better because there's less strain, there's less restrictions because of school boards and politics and all the things that are involved with that, the red tape, if you will.
Hmm. Right. So true. So many teachers I know are like, gosh, I love the kids, but man, my administration is just so tough to deal with. Or, sometimes it's a struggle between teachers and parents. And so if teachers are losing that love and that drive for why they originally um, started in this field, like you said, there really has been a mass exodus, and poof, man, it's tough to find quality people in any field, but especially something like this that demands so much of your time and your energy. And this is a job that's hard not to take home with you, you know, um, not just the grading and the stuff that you typically think a teacher takes home, but just the the general care that these individuals have for their students. And that can be draining because you're with these kids that, how many teachers call their students their kids, my kiddos, right? That's what you hear all the time, is because these teachers love these students as if they're own. And so um, that's just a lot to ask for a teacher, and the pay doesn't always go with it. So it's so hard to find quality people anymore, especially in this field. So it's tough to be in the position from, the school position, right? The administration, trying to find that quality personnel, those people that fit with what you're looking for as far as personality goes, and then also have the qualifications. And we work with a lot of residential treatment centers, and they go back and forth on, do we hire a certified teacher to work with our kids, or do we just hire residential staff? And sometimes it's even more difficult in that setting, because we're
Yeah.
already working with a population of students that might be struggling, working on their mental health and whatnot, and retaining quality personnel is hard enough, let alone somebody who also has a teaching certificate. So it's a real struggle for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, lucky for us, we have some stellar teachers who love what they do, put a lot of care and attention into the students. And again, not to knock other teachers, because I know there are a lot of stellar, amazing teachers in the traditional school system, and they care about their kids. They're excited for learning, things like that. But they have maybe a little less flexibility than they would have in an online environment because of the things that are kind of dictating what they have to do, the administration, the school board, whatever else. Whereas a lot of the online options are private based, so they can make decisions that are maybe a little more in the best interest of students and a little more in the best interest of their teachers, and kind of provide that flexibility. So I think that's, another opportunity for parents to recognize that, hey, maybe there is a little bit of flexibility. And that kind of leads into the next area of what a lot of the pain points were from parents, was just that they're looking for a individualized plan that's tailored to their students' needs, abilities, learning styles, interests, things like that. And a lot of times in a traditional system, you can't do that as well, because you have 30 kids in the classroom that you're trying to basically teach to the same level and make sure they have the same level of understanding. And that's a little bit trickier to do in a traditional school system. And so finding a program, whether that's homeschooling or using an online program, where you can really kind of tailor it to them, find their interests and help them explore those, I think is is really appealing to a lot of parents, because otherwise, they'll fall through the cracks, or they might not understand things as well because they're just trying to keep up with their classmates.
Right. We talked about this a little bit in a previous episode. We're kind of piggybacking off of that episode. But it's tough. The public school system is typically geared toward the average student. So if you're an average student, it works out really well for you. It's geared for you. It's tailored for you. You're the average student. If you're operating at a level that might be a little below average, or maybe accelerated, a little bit performing above average, you might struggle a little bit more because it's not really geared for you. It's made to tailor to the average student. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's hard to get around that, right? I mean, you can only do so much. The average, national average right now, as far as student to teacher ratio goes, is 16:1, which isn't bad. But depending on where you are located, that can go up pretty high. And this is from elementary all the way to high school. So it varies based on grade level as well. But that is one of the things we found in our research, is that parents are looking for a small student to teacher ratio. And you're right, Angelique, if there are 30 kids in a class, that is really tough to work with as a teacher, because you're providing that initial direct instruction. And hopefully the students are getting it and it's clicking and it's making sense. But by the end of the class period, there's not a whole lot of time to spend with each individual student one-on-one to make sure questions are being answered and students are getting that chance to work directly with a teacher on anything that they're struggling with. So that was another big thing, is that student to teacher ratio is big for parents.
Yeah, I mean, which makes sense, right? Especially if you are the parent of, those accelerated learning students, or the ones that are struggling. Like, you're a parent advocating for your child. Hey, how are they going to understand this? How are they going to get the best education possible? So totally makes sense that that's a pain point for parents, because again, if they're not in that average range, then what do you do? How can you help them? And I think another big thing that came up in our research was that they wanted a better environment, right? A safer and less negative environment. And, we've seen it repeatedly, all the school shootings, right? The threat of safety. Just this last month, was that national threat that went out, and schools were shut down based on just a threat, right? Thankfully, nothing actually happened, but just that fear of, oh, they're in an environment that's kind of scary. How can I help control that, right? And
Mhm.
online learning, homeschooling, those are ways to help maybe mitigate some of that negativity from an environment that could cause stress for students, stress for teachers. I mean, it's kind of a stressful time to think that that's a job hazard now, right? Or it's the hazard of me going to school to try to get an education. So I think this one totally makes sense for parents as they're considering, what are my options? How can I help my student be better, especially if, that safe environment is at the top of their list for that. I think that's huge. And then maybe for families who, are not in the majority, or are in marginalized groups, more diversity, right? That's another one that came up a lot, was that they want more diversity in a traditional school system that maybe doesn't always happen based on where they live or just other circumstances. And so having diversity isn't always easily accessible either in the traditional school system. And
Mhm.
that's something parents are kind of is on their radar, right?
Yep. Right. And that's something that if you're opting to homeschool or online school, you choose what groups you want to be a part of. So you can make it as diverse, I guess, or on the flip side, not diverse if you want. But the bottom line is you have control over that environment. Um, in a traditional school setting, you're pretty much locked into wherever your physical location is. You said, the public school that's in your district, right? Another thing, going back to just the general environment to students that are struggling with bullying, I think that's a part of that. Yes, there is cyberbullying. So even if you choose to go online school or homeschool, you can't ever, we can't fully protect our kids from everything that they're going to encounter in this world. You don't want to necessarily be the bubble boy. Was it from Seinfeld? I don't know, but right, we don't want to be living in a bubble, but parents, it is a valid concern. Students are getting bullied at school. A lot of cliques, that's something I remember growing up is I was part of other groups outside of school, and it usually wasn't such an issue. I played on sports teams, softball, and we were all just friends. We got along. But then for some reason, you get into school and cliques start forming and the drama starts happening and kids are getting bullied for no apparent reason other than they hang out with the wrong kids. And it can be a really tough environment for some students. So definitely one of the things that popped up on our research when it just comes to that environment that parents are looking for.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big part of it as well. And like you said, we can't protect them from everything, but as a parent, we can sure try, right? We can try to provide the best environment for them that's safe, and it provides an opportunity for them to learn the way that they need to learn. And I think that kind of ties into the opportunity for more flexibility as well, which is what parents said they also value, is time for their students to explore things and have activities outside of school so that they can figure out what they like. Or, a lot of families are trying this like RV life where they can live on the road, and, homeschooling or even online schooling can work in those situations. So they have an opportunity to also be immersed in the culture and real world experiences while getting the kind of the traditional education route too. And so it's kind of cool because it provides that flexibility. Realistically, you think of an 8-hour school day, and students maybe are 5 hours of that is actual learning in classroom instruction, right? Because you have recesses, you have breaks, assemblies, lunch, that takes away from some of that time. And so if you can condense that 8-hour day into a 4-hour day, that frees up time for your student to explore their gifts, their talents, maybe take a class in the community where they're learning some practical life skills instead of just, hey, I'm learning algebra, and it really provides that opportunity and flexibility. And then again, flexibility for parents to maybe say, hey, we're going to go to a museum this afternoon, or hey, dad has a business trip in Boston this week. Let's travel with him. It's that flexibility. And I think that's kind of the world we live in, where parents want that flexibility for their families. And that was a theme that came up a lot, was, well, how can we have this flexibility if we're a part of this traditional school system? And what are my alternatives?
Yeah. And that's something that we can really unpack. It's a good segue to the episodes that we have coming up over the next few weeks, but we're really going to unpack why parents are choosing to homeschool or look for alternatives to education. So what we covered today were the overarching themes, but we're really going to dig in deeper into that because it's true. Traditional schools provide a way for students to get education, right? Equitable education, no matter what your background is. But some parents are just looking for something different, and learning doesn't have to happen within the four walls of a school building, right? There are alternatives. And that's the amazing thing about the world we live in today, is the traditional school system does work really well for some families. So we don't want to take away from that, because it's a great thing. It's providing access to anybody who wants to be educated, right? Every student can be educated. But like we talked about earlier, there's a big shift happening in the state of Utah where we are. There's a whole program that is getting approved for vouchers, right? For parents to choose alternatives to the traditional public school option. So we'll definitely be unpacking that in the next few episodes here. So we thank you for joining us today, and we can't wait to continue this conversation.
Yeah, see you next week.